Serious. Job applicants who walked out of an interview before it was over. Why did you do it? I walked out of an interview before it began once. The interview was scheduled for 10 a.m., which I double-checked from the voicemail that they had left. I showed up about 10 minutes early, signed in, all that jazz, and waited. And waited. And waited. 45 minutes later I got up, asked the receptionist, who looked seriously embarrassed, to let my interviewer know I was no longer interested, and left. 2 hours later I got a rude call asking if I had forgotten the appointment. I laughed and hung up. Same exact thing happened to me, on my birthday no less. I waited over an hour because my parents were really pressuring me to find a job. I was 17 at the time. I know a birthday is just another day, and yes, I have since worked on my birthday. I was mainly upset because I had plans with a friend who was just in town for a couple of hours. It was crazy. To clarify, this wasn't an entry-level thing where they were getting a ton of applicants. This was for a lead position in the IT field. I walked out on an interview only once, and it was because the people organizing it were insane. They had arranged a large-scale interviewing process for the entire city. After getting there earlier, I realized there were quite a few applicants, so I didn't mind the fact that I had to wait for about 3 hours. Eventually, they asked a group of 3 of us into an office where we waited again for about 45 minutes. Again, I was just happy to have an interview, so I waited. Eventually, I met with the manager for the store who asked the standard range of questions, and I thought I did pretty well. At the end of the interview though, I was asked to sign a waiver. When I asked why, I found out that they had recorded the entire interview for the purpose of an episode of A Current Affairs and didn't tell me beforehand. After waiting for so long, just to be disrespected like that, I just walked out. I happened to catch the episode later and it featured some of the people who I'd waited with in the room. Good thing I didn't sign that waiver because the angle of the investigation was that unemployed people didn't put any effort into getting jobs, completely ignoring the fact that everyone had to wait for hours just to get a chance. So they want to make a point that unemployed people don't want to look for jobs, so they're setting up an entire operation that prevents unemployed people looking for jobs from getting a job. Sounds about right. I accidentally walked out on an interview. I had driven 4 hours to apply for a bar gaming room job in preparation for moving cities for study. I had purchased an apartment, so I kinda had to take job searching seriously. I had spent about 20 minutes talking to the gaming manager, during which the venue manager joined us, when some guy came up to them and started chatting to them. I sat there for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, wondering if the interview was over. When I decided that most questions had been asked and my existence had barely been acknowledged since the guy had rocked up, I half interrupted, shook one of the interviewer's hands and said thanks, and exited the premises with no idea how the interview went. I was crossing the road to my car when one of the interviewers chased me across the road and offered me the position. Turns out the guy interrupting the interview was one of the owners of the venue. I sometimes wonder how I got through life considering how socially inept I can be. I'm fairly socially inept myself at times, but even I know that one wasn't your fault. They should have at least said, "Oh, this is so-and-so, the venue owner," to you briefly before getting into a 5 to 10 minute conversation with him. They screwed up, not you, which is probably why they still offered you the job. I went into the interview with my prospective supervisor. I looked around the office and noticed that the garbage cans were full, the walls and carpet dirty, and the supervisor's desk was old and had chips out of it. So I mentioned that the company didn't seem to be doing any basic upkeep, and then asked point blank, "Is this a good company to work for?" She replied no, and hung her head. I said thanks, and walked out. This is the single saddest story I've read so far, and that's including the one about the non-profit that turned out to be scamming homeless and mentally ill people into signing up for expensive cell phone plans. The job was advertised as morning shift. The interviewer starts to explain how I would be used as a wild card to fill any shift that was needed, including short notice. I got another one. Went to a job interview for a listing listed as job at a huge high-tech firm on the West Coast. All it was a recruiter scouting for people. There were no interviews with the company, he just wanted to build my profile. He explained that if he found me a job, I would be an employee of his for 2 years before I would be an employee for the actual company. I wanted to bail then, but as soon as he said I wouldn't have any benefits and minimum wage, I noped out. Got up, grabbed my coat, and I was shaking my head while putting on my coat, and as I was walking out he said, "I'll just put you down as a lost cause." I'm familiar with headhunters, and was working with 2 other headhunters at the time. His terms were just straight robbery. I love how a lot of places feel like it's okay to advertise one position as if it's a completely different position and wonder why they can't find anyone to fill it. I had placed my resume on a few job sites and accidentally left my resume open to the public. You should not do that. I had gotten a call for an interview for an insurance thing. I was young and lacked common sense, so I excitedly went. When I got there were about 20 other people waiting to be interviewed. Turned out to be a group interview where some handsome bleached teeth dude talked about how great the job was, where we could set our own hours and make as much money as we wanted. All we had to do was pay a lot of money for their special training, and riches beyond our wildest dreams would come of it. Somehow the stupid slapped me in the face, and I got up from my chair and started to walk out. The con man asked me where I was going, and I calmly said, "This is a scam," and I advise others to walk out too. 2 others left with me. I find it sad that only 2 others walked out. When we had a break, some of them were excited about the job. They looked like normal adults with kids too. When I walked out, I felt so bad for their families. I was told about 40 minutes into an interview that the job I was interviewing for was going to be an 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. position. This had never been mentioned in the original job posting or in the preliminary call prior to the interview. This wasn't for a gas station job or anything either. High-profile law firm who basically needed a graphic designer to put together presentation materials overnight for use the following day. They had also set it so that I'd be working hours just barely under the limit to qualify as a full-time employee with benefits. Again, none of this was ever mentioned in the job description up to this point. The last straw was that they gave me a 30-minute test to prove I could work on a deadline, based on the actual materials I'd be working with. Chicken scratch post-it notes, unintelligible audio recordings, and other horrible sources I had to base my designs on. I walked out of the test about 5 minutes in. The sad part is that they will find someone to work under those conditions. Talked to a guy over the phone about a general labor job. He told me to be at his shop at 6:30. He said he was very strict about time, so I was there at 6:15, just to be sure. I get there the following day and proceed to be screamed at for not being there at 6. I try to be polite and say I must have misheard, even though I've never been so sure about something someone has said, but he insisted I was wrong and that I get out. I can't help but feel I'm better off for not having him as an employer. Sounds like you missed a bullet there. Probably a good thing he didn't hire you. Dodged. The word you're looking for is dodged. Too many leading questions. Not stuff that would be illegal, but would get the same responses. So how do you spend your weekends? What's your Sunday morning looking like? Sunday morning? I like to wake up early, have some coffee, make a healthy breakfast for myself and the people I love. Then I put in some nice clothes and go to my lawyer's office. We like to discuss the various places I have interviewed and been asked by the interviewer about my religious beliefs. I recently went to an interview for a bank in my area. First, the woman I spoke to on the phone misrepresented herself. She told me she was the assistant branch manager. Upon arrival, she told me she was head teller. The branch manager would be arriving shortly. I waited for an hour. After an hour of me double-checking the time and wondering if I'd gotten there early, I got up to leave. The head teller told me she'd be there in 5 minutes, but at that point I just figured I obviously wasn't important enough. I left. I got a call back 3 days later apologizing and asked if they could set up another meeting. At a bank I was nowhere near. I politely declined. Just after I'd been given 3 months' notice of layoff due to office closure from a job that I really liked, I took off early one day for an interview across town. When I arrived, I entered a waiting room full of people at least twice my age, in suits and resumes in hand. Upon seeing the sight, I realized I had very little chance at the position being offered, but since I was there, I may as well try. What I didn't expect is that we were all scheduled to interview together. We were all herded into a conference room where the group interview commenced. After a few rounds of questions, learning each other's qualifications, how we would handle various situations and so on, we collectively learned that this position was part-time, not what had been advertised, and paid a mere $9 an hour. I walked out, along with 3 other people. Only 3? Gotta wonder what put all those older, well-dressed business types in such dire situations that they were even considering that. Are you deciding to have any kids soon? We'd rather not hire you than have to fire you when you're knocked up. I was 15 at the time. Another job, I was around the same age, I was being interviewed for a babysitting job. All of a sudden, she hands me a sheet of chores including making dinner and being a waitress for the parents, cleaning the chimney and gutters, laundry had to be washed, folded and put away, cleaning toilets and times, every room had to be vacuumed. She then said that the kid would be on daycare, so I'd have plenty of privacy. I just left. Did she assume a 15-year-old was applying for a nanny or housekeeping position? They flat out lied to me about what I was interviewing for. I was told it was for a technician trainee position, but it was really for an unpaid internship that had 12-hour days and a mandatory 6-month period before I could move on to a paid job, which would have started out at $11 per hour. When I was told, I just told him it wasn't worth my time and got up to walk out. He got all mad and said, "Son, you have to show your worth first." And I just said, "Sir, I have bills to pay, and as much as I'd like to conform to your wishes so that I could have a career, I don't live in a fantasy world where I can just focus on work." I'm sure if you'd stayed long enough, he would have gone on about bootstraps and personal responsibility. None of which apply to him, apparently. I went on a job interview while employed at my current company. A company that is safe, with great co-workers and a laid-back fun environment. However, the salary was less than industry average and a long commute, so I applied at another place. As I'm in the interview, it's going great, but then the reality of leaving my current job hits like a ton of bricks. I start bobbling questions I was acing before, and then I realize I just wasn't ready to leave yet. I knew me leaving would hurt the company immensely, and that leaving would hurt people I know considered more friends than co-workers. So I told my interviewer, and he understood completely. He saved my record on file and ended the interview on a good note.